You can literally kill a person with oxalic acid. This is the oxalate that's in the plant. Sweet potatoes, all that beta carotene loaded with oxalate. Tea, people often don't realize that basic black tea is high oxalate. So we love these foods thinking they're healthy, but ultimately in the end,
I am thrilled to have Sally Norton on the channel.
Sally K. Norton, a public health and oxalate expert,
best-selling author of
Toxic Superfoods.
We've incorporated plant foods in every single diet everywhere. There's not a plant-free diet until the modern idea that you could actually live without plants. We've just assumed they're necessary for nutrition, so they're everywhere.
It's not just the vegans and the vegetarians, it's just general people living their lives trying to be healthy that the oxalates can impact them. I had started with an Atkins diet. I was eating tons and tons of spinach. I dealt with the pain of cystitis for years, and nobody was talking about the fact that the spinach could be causing this kind of pain.
Wait a second. We thought we were supposed to eat a lot of spinach.
Turns out if you keep eating these kind of toxic, dangerous levels of oxalate, they do accumulate in all those tissues from not just your kidneys and bladder, but your teeth and your eyeballs and your thyroid gland and your shoulder joint and anywhere else. I'm surprised at how many people come to me with mental issues, especially anxiety, and how much anxiety disappears for people. You can be on a junk food diet of potato chips and French fries and get plenty of oxalate, or drink tea all the time. But if you get into the kind of keto world, you might be starting to eat a lot of nuts. Nuts are crazy high in oxalate.
So then would you recommend to go cold turkey carnivore?
A lot of people come running to me from the carnivore diet and go, ever since I've been on the carnivore diet, I've been sick as a dog.
Hey everyone, I've got something exciting to share. I'm heading to Meatstock 2025, and I'd love for you to join me. This is going to be an intimate carnivore convention set right up in the beautiful Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. You'll get to hang out with me and learn from some of the best voices in the carnivore world. And guess what? Sally Norton, who I'm hosting on my channel today, will also be joining us. Get your tickets now before they sell out, and don't forget to use code TheCarnitarian for $25 off. I'll see you all in the Smokies. Hey everyone, today I am thrilled to have Sally Norton on the channel. She is an author, researcher, and the expert on oxalates. She's here for a deep dive into how oxalates can impact our health and what we can do about it. I'm so excited to have you here, Sally. Thank you so much for coming on and meeting with me today. Welcome to the channel.
It's really fun to connect with you and your audience. Can't wait to see what we do today.
I'm excited about it. We have something in common, that we are both alumni of the same university. We both went to Cornell. We've got that in common. And I love that. We were just reminiscing a little bit about campus life.
Yeah, Cornellians. Yeah. Leaves a permanent scar.
It really does. It's, they say it's like Ithaca is gorgeous, but in the winter it is just like dismal. And, it's a wild place over at Cornell during the winter. So anyway, back to what we're here for. Why don't you get us started? Can you explain to us generally, what oxalates are, why they're found in so many types of diets, why we should care so much about oxalates?
Yeah, this little overlooked mystery, sneaky little compound that's hanging out in a lot of plant foods that we eat. We've incorporated plant foods in every single diet everywhere. There's not a plant-free diet until the modern idea that you could actually live without plants. We've just assumed they're necessary for nutrition, so they're everywhere. And a lot of the foods that become daily staples are plants that deliver oxalate, and that's naturally in the foods. It's naturally produced by the plants. It's in the soil as well. It's around us, so much so that it's ubiquitous, but being ignored. It's in basic things like potatoes, sweet potatoes, in popular things like spinach and chocolate. You can be on a junk food diet of potato chips and French fries and get plenty of oxalate, or drink tea all the time. Get in the tea thing because you work outside and you're dehydrated and you're buying tea by the half gallon. It can be in all kinds of diets, but if you get into the kind of keto world, you might be starting to eat a lot of nuts. Nuts are crazy high in oxalate. Almost any direction you go with diet, either in the junkier or the healthier direction, there seems to be these foods that have the higher oxalate content lingering in all of them. And then there's this, people have their secret little Reese's peanut butter habits and their peanut M&Ms, and this kind of nuts and chocolate combination is all over the place, really popular, starting in the end of the year here in the US, where we have Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas, and there's just endless reasons to eat chocolate, and nuts seem to be sneaking in everywhere now.
Yeah, it does seem like oxalates are in all the food. Are they in all plant foods? I mean, are all plant foods something that we should generally be worried about, or are some of them oxalate free?
When it comes to oxalates, it's very different how much oxalates are in the different plants. So in the greens, for example, there's only three, basically three, that are really high, and they are uber toxic high, and the others are uber low, super low. All the lettuces and arugula, turnip greens are really low in oxalate. And yet there's three popular ones that we call the dark, healthy leafy greens that are ridiculously high and quite toxic. And that's beet greens, Swiss chard, and spinach. Those three are trouble, but they're the popular ones. And romaine has been deemed, oh, too pale.
That one is not high in oxalate.
Not at all. Romaine, cabbage, all the leaf lettuces are very, very low in oxalate.
One superfood everyone always talks about is kale. I mean, where does that fall on the spectrum?
Kale's pretty low. It has like 3 times as much as cabbage. So it goes somewhere to 6 to 12 milligrams per serving, maybe. That's tiny, because something like spinach, which is spoken in the same sentence by most people, spinach and kale and spinach. No, your typical spinach salad is going to have over 400 milligrams of oxalate, and your typical spinach smoothie could have 1,000, but your serving of kale may have 12. That's a completely different level.
So if people are aware of oxalates and they say to themselves, okay, I understand that I should be monitoring my amount of oxalate. Where are the oxalates hiding? What are some of the unexpected places where oxalates are, where people don't realize they are? If people understand, they're in potatoes or they're in spinach, like what are the things that we're not thinking of that you think people overlook?
Bran. So all the whole grains and any bran concentrates are high oxalate. Quinoa is like this new superhero in the gluten-free world, supposedly a source of protein, very high in oxalate. Chia seeds, people are into the chia bowls for their gut health or something. Sweet potatoes, all that beta carotene loaded with oxalate. In the nuts generally. And tea, people often don't realize that basic black tea is high oxalate.
And so explain to us exactly what the problem is with oxalate. Like, why do we need to care about the dosage that we're getting? What's it doing when it gets in our bodies?
With all toxins, and this is a toxicity problem. This is not a sensitivity or an allergy. It's not like gluten. It is a toxicity. And with toxins, dose is the issue. We have to know how much we can handle and manage, and that varies from person to person. Some people, you can literally kill a person with oxalic acid. This is the oxalate that's in the plants, right? You literally can kill someone. In that amount that it takes to kill them varies anywhere from 3 or 4 grams up to 15 grams. So this is a huge window of toxicity. So it might take longer to kill you than it might take the next guy. But it's really important that we live within the bounds of what we can excrete, because we have no way to metabolize or break down oxalate in the body at all. In fact, the liver makes additional oxalate. The liver makes half what the capacity is for us to excrete it. So there's room to eat some oxalate. You don't have to be zero oxalate. You can't really do that unless you really do go full pure meat only eating. So there's no reason to try to zero it out all the way. But what's not understood is how little we really can excrete. It needs to be mild. Our exposure should be at a mild level, not at this super uber toxic space that is happening now, because we're using these super high oxalate foods in ways we never did before, like the green smoothies and the keto bread with all the nuts and these nut snacks and so on. The problem is now that since no one's paying attention to oxalate, when you think about food, you think about calories and fat and sodium. It says, well, hey, how much oxalate? Nobody, your dietitian, your doctor, nobody is thinking this way. So we've been adding in these high oxalate foods in complete oblivion. And now we're at a point where the idea of healthy eating is basically a high oxalate diet, which is ultimately toxic. So we love these foods thinking they're healthy, but ultimately in the end, it's a really bad marriage and it's going to end ugly.
I mean, the name of your book, right? Like Toxic Superfoods. This is, I think, what the problem is that when people think healthy foods, they think of these superfoods. And when you just double down and triple down on healthy foods, I mean, it's not just the vegans and the vegetarians, it's just general people living their lives trying to be healthy. that the oxalates can impact them. Like, how physically do we feel the effects of oxalate when we're in that situation where we've gone too far with them?
Well, this is something that is just completely off the radar. So most of the time you would never connect the symptoms with the foods. For one reason is because it takes a while for you to absorb them. They're absorbed in the stomach and the upper small intestine. So depending on what form you're eating and what else is in the food, it can be absorbed rather quickly, or it can take 4 or 5 hours to really absorb the most of it. So there's this delayed effect if there's an acute effect. And when there's an acute effect, it's usually a couple hours later, and it might be fatigue, it might be changes in your neuroperception, your ability to fall asleep. You might get hiccups or some kind of pain. You might get irritable bladder as it starts loading up your kidneys and your bladder. You might start having to run to the bathroom more frequently. You could have high urine volume. You could end up waking up in the middle of the night because you're irritating your bladder with it. It could be anything, or it could be nothing. Like most diseases start with no symptoms at all. Initially, your system has so much redundancy and capacity to manage a toxic situation, you don't necessarily notice it until it starts over time eroding your vitality and your capacity to kind of absorb the stress of the toxin. And then it becomes worse and worse with time. And we call it aging.
Yeah, this is something that I absolutely have dealt with in my past is interstitial cystitis. And I had, started with an Atkins diet so long ago. This was right out of college. And I was like, spinach and steak and blue cheese. I was eating tons and tons of spinach. And, I didn't realize that I dealt with the pain of cystitis for years.
Oh,
And once I reduced the oxalate, like my entire life changed. But nobody was talking about the fact that the spinach could be causing this kind of pain.
it's remarkable to me that it's not well known that bladder pain can be from oxalate and the oxalate crystals that it's forming as it's coming out of the kidneys. We know the major cause, the major source of the substance that makes up a kidney stone is oxalic acid binding with calcium. You get these calcium oxalate stones forming, and they start clumping and clustering, and then they block the passages in the kidney, and you get some really serious pain, and you're in trouble because you can't block that flow. It causes infections and so on. Why wouldn't a nasty crystal that is so toxic and quite damaging to the kidneys not irritate the bladder?
Right. Right. Nobody puts that together.
For the bladder. It isn't fine for the bladder. And this combination of the oxalic acid ions that aren't bound with calcium and the calcium oxalate crystals that can be these nanoparticles that are particularly toxic start eroding the health of the cells of the bladder, eroding the gag layer, which is this slimy covering that the cells make to make the bladder real slippery and protect the cells from the toxins in the urine. That starts to break down, and then you have toxins access to the nerves in the bladder, and the bladder can deliver some pretty awful pain when you've got this damage to the bladder lining. You keep peeing out oxalates all the time, it's hard to repair.
I mean, I just have to tell you that you have helped me so much. I mean, your information, being able to go low oxalate for me with the problem of interstitial cystitis has been amazing because now it's like it's life changing for me, right? You wake up in the morning with cystitis and you're like, you know, this could not be worse. The level of pain is so intense. And now I wake up in the morning and I don't have to wonder, like, how much pain am I going to be in? What's my day going to be like? What appointments am I going to have to cancel? You know, it's so different. It's such a different quality of life.
It's amazing how much health affects every aspect of your life, and what a big deal it is to finally get relief, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
Simple diet changes makes a world of difference. It's
yeah,
cool.
it's really cool. It's something that people really need to pay more attention to. Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more.
Right. Absolutely. I speak with so many women who have got this pain and they just don't know how to get rid of it because the oxalate is there. It's in their systems. And even if they now decide to go low oxalate, there's this period of time where you are still dealing with clearing, the oxalate. How
It's,
long of a
yeah, because
process can that be?
it could be, it depends on the person, and it depends on what we're talking about. I think the kidneys are known to accumulate oxalate, not just as kidney stones, but this sort of nephrocalcinosis, because the kidneys literally hang on to the oxalate crystals to keep the passages flowing so that they don't form stones. And the rest of the body has a similar mechanism that is understudied. They don't really look at what we call extrarenal accumulation of oxalates, which is a well-established fact in science for the last 50 something years. We've known that there's this accumulation in tissues, but particularly in the kidneys. And my feeling is that it takes a good year and a half if someone has a lot of nephrocalcinosis and stone tendencies or crystalline urine. It can take a while for the kidneys to unload their burden of accumulated oxalate after you lower oxalate. Surprisingly, though, some people, the minute they quit eating it at every meal, they start seeing much happier bladder. And especially the first week or so, because it takes a while for the body to go, hey, wait, you mean you're not going to keep eating this stuff? We can finally clean up the mess you've been making all these years. And so it might take a while before the body goes after this calcifications in the kidneys and elsewhere. I think the body starts with the kidneys. So the poor urinary tract remains in harm's way long after you stop eating the oxalate, because you now have an oxalate accumulation problem that you need to reverse. And that reversal hasn't been well studied, but here we can use common sense and basic observation of our bodies, and we can learn a lot. And that's what we've been doing as a community who's now got the awareness to be able to observe with more information and interpret what's going on. So it's really fascinating what we're learning as a community.
Yeah, it is. And aside from the kidneys, there are other places where these oxalates love to sort of gather, hang out, and wreak havoc. I mean, we hear, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, they can hang out in your joints, in your eyes, in your ear. I mean, can all of the problems that people are having in those areas, that can all be attributed to oxalate as well?
Potentially, yes, for sure. They do accumulate in all those tissues and do affect the function of those tissues. And whether your ear problem or your eye problem is oxalate related is not always easy to tell. But when you reverse the diet, amazing thing happens. The ringing in the ear stops, the hearing improves, the vision improves. I've seen cataracts reversed. Night vision almost always improves in people who go on low oxalate diets. Visual acuity improves, a loss of astigmatism. Now your eyeballs have a better shape. It's amazing, the response to taking out sweet potatoes and spinach out of your diet. It's pretty cool.
That is really cool. And these, like you said, these are some of the foods that people think are the most healthy. People are just very confused. Why do you think it is that, the oxalate research isn't gaining more momentum? Like, why do you think there's such ignorance of it still out there?
We have a very siloed system of funding and research and thinking about the body. And since the 1960s, almost all the funding and the bulk of the research is going on with kidney stone and other kidney type research. And the kidney people have no interest in your hearing, none, or your vision or your teeth or your saliva glands or your thyroid gland. So they act as if this toxin is fine anywhere in the body except the kidney. The kidney is the one organ designed to concentrate the stuff, is the one organ that's truly going to be in harm's way, and it has the best ability to handle oxalate, and it's designed to handle it. It's the least likely organ to be damaged. If your kidneys are damaged by oxalate, you're at end stage oxalate poisoning, not at the beginning. It's not that if you get kidney stones, then oxalate is a problem. Quite the opposite. Most of us inherently have great kidneys that can produce the kind of urine that prevents this clumping and clustering of the oxalates and stone formation. It's only 12% of the population who lacks all these redundant systems that prevents the kidney stones. We have it all inside out because we're so narrowly focused on the kidney stone as the only toxic effect of eating too much oxalate. And even then, they're busy worrying about your metabolism versus the amount of oxalic acid that's getting into your bloodstream and circulating in your body.
It's just such a shame, because if we could address oxalate, so many people could be helped. But now there are people who say, well, why should I care about oxalate? Like, my body makes oxalate. We convert different things into oxalate. Is there a difference between the oxalate that we produce and the oxalate we eat, or are they the same in how we manage to eliminate them? Or is it just a load issue?
It is a load issue, and it really, there isn't any difference between one oxalic acid molecule and the next. If it's produced in and by a cell in the liver, it has a certain environment going on there, and you can produce more if you have a lot of inflammation and so on. But the liver is the first major organ beyond the digestive system that gets hit by the oxalate that you eat. So when you have your spinach smoothie or your cup of strong tea, very quickly this oxalic acid goes into this hepatic circulation and is delivered straight to the liver. The liver has no ability to break it down, metabolize it, do anything with it. It might get a little bit might get stuck there because it forms these lipid crystals, but the liver adds more oxalate to that oxalate load that just came into the body. It's the same oxalic acid ion, and that's moving back into the bloodstream, up into the heart and the lungs, and back into the heart again, out into peripheral circulation. So it hits from the food, it hits the stomach, it hits the bloodstream, and in the bloodstream is your white blood cells and your red blood cells, and it's definitely affecting them. It's damaging your circulating white cells, and then it's going straight to your liver, stressing your liver, using up glutathione, so the liver cells protect themselves with their glutathione, potentially reducing your ability to handle other toxins because this is so day in and day out, meal in, meal out. And then it's going straight to your heart and your lungs and your heart again. And so, wait a minute, major organs of digestion, liver, heart, and lungs already hit with oxalate from your diet. It can come from the liver straight if you're making too much. If you have a rare genetic disease that hardly anyone has, that can kill a person. Turns out if you keep eating these kind of toxic, dangerous levels of oxalate that are in things like spinach smoothies, it's not going to be pretty in the long run. And now, unfortunately, we're missing that story.
Yeah,
So you make a little oxalate, but more isn't better. More isn't
right.
because you make a little and a little's naturally around in your environment doesn't mean that more is safe.
And then this brings me to my next question, because then we think, okay, well, if oxalate is bad, we should eliminate it completely. Like if, some is a little bad, 0 is good. And is that what we should be striving for? Like, I'm carnivore. Should I be striving for 0 oxalate carnivore, which might mean my eliminating spices, coffee, cocoa, things like that? What are your thoughts there?
Well, the lower the oxalate level coming into the body, the potentially lower the level of oxalate in your bloodstream, the more likely it is that you're going to give the body an excuse to start releasing oxalate deposits from not just your kidneys and bladder, but maybe your teeth and your eyeballs and your thyroid gland and your shoulder joint and anywhere else. And in some cases, if the body gets super enthusiastic about doing that, it can turn on a lot of inflammation and cause a lot of damaging symptoms. And you don't want to do this overzealous release of oxalate from tissues because it's a kind of a repoisoning. You're just putting oxalic acid back into the bloodstream. It's just from your past diet, from your past smoothies and your past keto bread and whatever is now coming back to haunt you all over again. And that is dangerous.
This is the terrible oxalate dumping that we're talking about.
Yeah, this is when it gets really heavy, when you get this clearing going and it's such an enthusiastic level that it's too much, and too much oxalic acid back in the bloodstream and too much inflammation, because it takes the immune system to do this work of digging out these deposits and breaking them down and putting them back in circulation or pushing them out through the skin, or maybe pushing them out back in the bloodstream where it comes out in the feces as well. It can come out in different ways, but the kidneys are still going to take a hit with that. So if that's too much, you get too much inflammation turning on. You have a lot of side effects of excessive inflammation and side effects of changes in calcium levels in the blood. Because one of the toxic things that oxalate's doing is it's grabbing calcium. And so if there's a lot of oxalic acid being released into the blood, the ionic calcium that's so critical to pacemaker function and cell function generally can be lowered, and you have this hypocalcemia situation, which can cause arrhythmias. You can feel like you're having a heart attack or a stroke. You can end up in the emergency room scaring yourself with these electrolyte dips. Sometimes this is happening without symptoms. You don't have to have symptoms to have this wobbling of calcium levels and other electrolytes in the blood. But adding this oxalate compound is adding this mineral chelator that's affecting electrolyte levels. And electrolyte levels are critical to cell function and cell energy. You don't want to be messing that up.
So then would you recommend, if people were trying to go cold turkey carnivore, don't do it? If you have a past history of, heavy keto, almond flour things, that you don't want to take that path?
If you have a past history of any weird health problems that were unexplained, and you have a history of either leaky gut or kidney issues, then you really need to be careful about going zero oxalate. You do not want to do that quickly. A lot of people come running to me from the carnivore diet and go, ever since I've been on the carnivore diet, I've been sick as a dog and I can't stop being sick and I feel horrible and I'm exhausted and everyone else is happy on it and just poor me. And they don't realize how many people who do go for a full meat diet with this history of health problems can end up with this oxalate clearing illness.
And can you explain to us a little bit about like why is it so individual that some people have that and some people don't? What is it about our bodies that make one person more able to tolerate or have that threshold for, high dose or high release that other people don't tolerate?
Yeah, we don't have good science to fully explain this, but you can certainly see that there's natural variations in biology. I mean, one tree will produce 3 different colors of leaves in the fall. Like there's a natural variation from person to person. Everyone is completely unique genetically, but I don't think the genetics are the biggest issue. I think the issues include all of your toxic exposures and all of your nutrition status. And a lot of that starts in fetal development or even starts in your grandmother's body with your mother's fetal development, because that ovary that became you was developed in your grandmother's body. So there can be even stressors all the way back from the formation of the ovary that became you, whether they be mosquito repellents or other toxins, family trauma, stress, war. All kinds of toxicities can be chemical in nature, they can be emotional in nature, and that can affect our biology. The expression of biology is really epigenetic in nature, and all these effects are epigenetic. So it seems genetic, but it's probably about genetic expression and your access to your best sides of your metabolism. And then you have just plain old nutritional status. If your mom ate a high oxalate diet while you were pregnant, that may have set you up. Well, she was pregnant, set you up for problems. You may have been born early because of it, or born small, or, if your diet as a child wasn't great, or if you had a stressful home, or if they were spraying for mosquitoes on your street as a kid and you're out there playing. There's all kinds of things that are going to affect your basic vitality and your body's excretion systems and all that. And so everybody's history and their genetics are special.
I mean, I hear you on this. It's wild because it's wild to think that your grandmother can have such an effect on your day to day today. I mean, it's insane, but it's what you're saying makes absolute sense that we come from so far before we were here.
We do. We rely on our grandparents and we're relying on our children to preserve our well-being by the way they eat when they're teenagers and when they're children, because their ovaries will pass on the next generation. And much of genetics is your mitochondrial DNA. And the mitochondria all are just the maternal line. So a great deal of your genetics is in the maternal line. And the maternal line is sensitive because those ovaries have been around a while.
Wow, it's incredible. So now tell us then, like, what are the best strategies for people, or what are some tips you can give people who are having these issues, who've gone to a carnivore diet or what they think is fantastic, a zero oxalate diet? What are some things they can do when they start experiencing oxalate dumping symptoms to sort of stop that?
Well, the first and best medicine for addressing this excessive inflammation and oxalate release that's raising oxalate levels in the bloodstream and the kidneys and so on is to add some oxalate back into the diet. That becomes a signal. You have to add enough that it's a signal, enough gets absorbed so the body goes, oh, wait, you're eating it again? It's coming from the diet too. Ooh. And then the body will go back into what we call sequestration mode and hold on to the oxalates that are in the tissues and slow down that process. So you may need a double strength, big old cup of iced tea at the end of the day, maybe 2 or 3 ounces of beet juice. Those are good things to start with because they're very watery. And that oxalic acid in the watery solution of tea or a juice like beet juice means you get quick absorption. So you should get a pretty quick response to it, and you'll be able to tell if you've done enough. If you haven't, you need to add some more oxalates, a third of a sweet potato, a couple bites of dark chocolate. These things with oxalates, you can use them in moderated portions as medication to tell the body to relax and calm down. And then you can help with the side effects. The side effects include that inflammation creates acidity. So you can use alkalizing techniques like Alka-Seltzer Gold, lemon juice, citric acid in lemon juice, and citric acid supplements like calcium citrate is very good for helping the body break down oxalate, but it also is protecting the kidneys from developing kidney stones in the process of oxalate release, because people will sometimes start getting kidney stones after they stop eating the oxalates because it's coming from that rush to heal, that rush to get it out of the system can start clogging up the exit route.
Wow. Okay. Those are great tips. Thank you for sharing. Now, uh, you have got 2 new books coming out, right? So you've got the Toxic Superfoods book, which is out, but then there's something else coming out. There's a data companion, and you've got a recipe book coming out, right?
The data companion's out and has a lot of information about the oxalate in foods. And then I have a PDF cookbook on my website that's been there quite a while that I'm transforming it so it looks like the data companion. It's printable with the spiral binding, and so it's easier to use. It's not so easy to use a PDF for a cookbook. So that's coming out, and there'll be more materials later, but hopefully before the end of the year, you'll be able to get the cookbook in the print form.
Awesome. But now the data companion, like that just shows people, you can go through there. There's an index of foods and you can see how much oxalate you're getting. And for us carnivores, we could probably go back and see how much oxalate we used to get and why we're having oxalate dumping problems.
And I think it's most useful when you're trying to add back in, say you need 50 milligrams or 75 milligrams, so you can kind of craft your system for using it as medication. So that's where it's really useful. You come down low enough where you're down in a pretty safe range of a consumption. And now if you've got this oxalate clearing illness going on, you need to use it kind of medically to manage that. And this is where the data companion is probably at its most useful. But just in regular toxic superfoods, there's in the appendix, there's a table, it's a dosing table that shows you how much sweet potatoes will give you 30 milligrams of oxalate or something like whatever. So you can translate, I want so much oxalate into how much food it is, and have kind of equivalent if you're switching from, say, tea to some chocolate to some sweet potato to beets or something like that.
I mean, what is the typical for like a low oxalate diet? What are the ranges there that you recommend or that you keep to say, I'm not going to eliminate it, but I'm going to stay low?
Well, a normal oxalate diet is considered to be about 150 milligrams a day, or maybe 200 max, somewhere in there. A low oxalate diet is a therapeutic diet they use for states of illness like kidney stones, and that's about 50, 60 milligrams a day. And they're both doable, very doable. If you get where you're eating a lot of meat, it's very easy to stay quite below 50, and that may be too low for some people. Mostly you got to calculate it on kind of a back of the envelope mindset where you're getting a general sense of how many zeros are in your oxalate content. Are you at 1,000, 100, and get a sense for what of these foods you've been overdoing and how you can live without them. You'll get down. It's not that hard. You don't have to necessarily count in great detail. And that's why the data book is not necessary for everybody, for sure, but it can be really helpful because it gives them a lot of security that they know how to look things up, and they can always get answers to their questions about what they're eating. Because everyone's diet is shifting over time and each person's doing something individual, you kind of have to look out for yourself and start to figure it out. It takes some time. You don't want to memorize anything because the brain and memorization, forget it.
Yeah. I mean, in my house, I'm the only carnivore. And so I feel badly. Like when I go into the supermarket and I see the produce section, I'm just like, I don't want to do this to my family. Like I don't want to serve them these, high oxalate foods. And so I feel like it would be great to have a list to say, these are safer than these. And here are some alternatives to, the traditional recipe, like the sweet potato casserole. There's a better way to do that. Does your cookbook sort of give ideas like that, like switching traditional foods for lower oxalate foods?
Somewhat. It doesn't have a complete tutorial on how to convert your old recipes over, but it does offer some of that and plenty of examples of that. So there's a whole big section on the vegetables. There's a huge section on vegetables cut up by vegetables. So the cauliflower recipes and the cabbage recipes are together, like depending on what vegetable you're trying to use, turnips, rutabaga, all those ones that are in the cabbage family are low. So there's a lot of those in there. And then how to work with the black-eyed peas, which is a sort of unfamiliar bean, and what to do with red peppers and cucumbers and pumpkins and squashes. So it's all there because you can switch from a sweet potato to a squash, but the squash is much more wet. So same with these, the turnips and the rutabaga, they're more wet. So simple techniques for remembering to dry them out in the pan before you turn them into a mashed vegetable that fits that role of mashed potatoes on the plate. So all those techniques where you get an end result that's kind of classic traditional cooking, where you tend to have an entree and a couple side dishes and a salad, this cookbook very much aligns with that, and it gives you ways to work without the soy, without dairy, without eggs, without the gluten. So for people who have a lot of tendencies to sensitivities, I think people who are interested in the carnivore diet tend to be in that camp, because you do well because you're reducing all these things that tend to stimulate the immune system. And plants are loaded with compounds that have the power to be triggers for inflammation and pain. So a lot of people feel so much better when they reduce their plant foods, but they're figuring out which ones you can eat, and how to make a truly great salad, how to really work with an egg and make it awesome, how to make a sauce without dairy, and how to use rice pasta or other substitutes for pasta. There's a lot of directions you can go that still stay within kind of the classic Western style of cooking. And then I've got, various ways of working with, there's a lot of Asian recipes and Asian approaches to cooking that are naturally better and lower in oxalate and easy to do and fun. People enjoy Asian dishes. So, there's a lot of directions you can go. You just need a little bit of initial guidance about where you can use some of these oxalate ingredients, because if the rest of the recipe is low, you can still use a little, say, cumin. But if you're throwing a lot of cumin on top of other high oxalate spices on top of a moderately oxalaty dish, that becomes a problem. But in the context of a low oxalate diet, you can use a little celery, you can use a little bit of artichoke hearts, you can use these more medium foods, and small amounts of allspice and these seasonings that have oxalates isn't a big deal anymore. But
that opens up a whole nother world for people too, because then they don't have to be afraid of oxalate, period. Like they can do a little bit of spice in their meat-based diet and still be okay. It's not that you have to eliminate it completely. It's just a load, like we said, a load issue.
Yeah. The value of the strict carnivore diet is that as you're adding things back in, you might have an opportunity to catch an odd allergy. Like I'm allergic to sage and clove. And so a lot of seasonings, like your basic, like fish boil, tends to have sage and clove in it. And your sausages tend to have sage in it. But my sausage recipe, like my meat cookies, which is one of my favorite recipes, is really just 4 ingredients. Salt, white pepper is a low oxalate peppers, a lot of rosemary, and the ground pork together. If you have good ground pork that has enough fat in it, because the quality of your ingredients always matters to the outcome of your dish. If you don't love your dish, maybe you didn't get the best ground pork or you didn't get the best version of white pepper. So you want to be selective in your ingredients, and then home cooking becomes miraculously delicious and can be fun if there's someone in the house to enjoy the preparation and cleanup with you. It's harder.
Yeah, I mean, I love cooking at home. To me, when we go out to eat at restaurants, I'm always like, why am I doing this? I can make this so much better at home.
So much better at home with better ingredients and, with your own music playing, and you can sway to your own music. It's just what you need is a good lackey to get the ingredients in the house.
That's what I need. I'm lucky in that. I think I might have one of those in my house. He does the shopping. He does the food shopping. So nice. Okay. So Sally, I would love if you would indulge me and participate in a speed round with me, which we love to do because people think it's really fun. And I think it's really fun to just get sort of a little bit more of a personal take on you. And if you would, please.
Okay, here goes the game show. Linda's game show. See if the contestant can hold up under the pressure.
Let's see how it goes. No pressure. You may or may not have seen these or had time to read them before we spoke. Okay, number 1. What is the most surprising food that people don't realize is high in oxalate?
Might be a toss-up between sweet potatoes and bran.
Okay. And what is one myth about plants that you'd love to see disappear? Plants in general.
Well, there's a 2-part answer. One is that they're so helpless and they're just here for us, not themselves. And the other is that they're so good for you. Just keep eating more because more is better.
More is better. Yeah, just not true.
Sure.
Can you tell us what is one surprising health benefit that you have discovered from going low oxalate?
Well, I'm surprised at how many people come to me with mental issues, especially anxiety, and how much anxiety disappears for people. Joint pain, of course, is common. And the fun one is that this is kind of like reversing aging, this little fountain of youth. Pretty exciting stuff.
There we are. Here we are today, looking quite fine, I might say.
Ravishing.
You're always looking so good, Sally. All right. Give us one superfood, and I'll put that in quotations for those who are not watching but listening, that's really just a supermarketing gimmick.
Almond milk.
Ugh, the worst.
It is the worst. It is the
The
worst.
worst.
A dilute solution of oxalic acid, full of weird fillers and highly treated with all kinds of heat and chemicals and in a plastic box. It's just not good.
Not okay. Everyone should throw away their almond milk. I totally agree. If you could ban one high oxalate food from every grocery store, what would it be?
All the nut-based snack foods, the trail mixes, the nut bars, the power bars, the protein bars, the nut butters. Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah, especially anything almond-based.
Almond. I mean, are peanuts, since they're not actually nuts, are they though high oxalate as well?
They are. They have a high bioavailability. That means the oxalic acid in them gets into your bloodstream easily. So the three worst ones are almonds, cashews, and peanuts. And of course, those are the popular ones.
Of course. Wow. Of course they have to be. What's your favorite way to satisfy a crunchy snack craving that's low oxalate?
Well, for me, it would be pork rinds, but other people might also like Parmesan crisps, pumpkin seeds, sprouted would be better and salted, rice cakes, dill pickles, romaine lettuce ribs are pretty crunchy, and you can pile things on those things too.
Nice. Those are great suggestions. I'm a big fan of those cheese crisps and pork rinds, of course. If you could add a mandatory nutrition course to Cornell's curriculum, what would it cover? I think I know the answer.
Yeah, this is kind of an obvious one. Yes, the plant anti-nutrients and food toxicities and the nutrient bioavailability issues that we're not paying attention to in nutrition. We pay lip service to it, but we don't deal with it. So that whole thing about plant anti-nutrients with, of course, oxalate would cover half the semester. We'd be just talking about. And then at Cornell, I really regret that right across the quad, we weren't getting an agricultural perspective on food. So there'd be another course about food production. There's a whole lot to learn about that. And nutrition people don't have a clue what it takes to grow good food. And they should.
Awesome. They absolutely should. Yeah, there's a bit of a disconnect there.
Big time.
Here's the next one, Sally. Tell us, what is the weirdest food combination that you enjoy?
Telling of myself here.
Give it to us.
Sardines with a really nice Dijon mustard wrapped in salami.
Really? I've not heard that combination before. I might have to try that.
And or ham. You can do a ham outer layer with salami, then the mustard and the sardines, roll them up. Yeah.
That sounds like savory to the max. That sounds actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And finger food and sort of gourmet, and you just have to get the right Dijon.
What's your favorite?
There's a local chain here called Fresh Market, and their house brand is the best.
Okay, I've got one of those by me. I'm going to go look for it.
Good.
Okay, next question. If oxalates had an official emoji, what would it look like? I'm picturing like arrows or something.
A crystalline skull and crossbones with spinach hanging out of its mouth.
That is quite the visual. I like it. Let's make that happen. Who do we need to email about that? And then last question. Thanks for being such a fun participant here. Last question. If oxalates had a theme song, what would it be?
Tainted love.
Oh, that's funny.
First I'm running after you, then I'm running away from you. Yeah, I think that kind of encapsulates this whole thing where we have this fascination over these high oxalate foods. We're convinced they're so wonderful for them. We have this addictive relationship with them, and it's really like a toxic relationship.
It is. I mean, oxalates are a bad boyfriend. Yeah.
They're a very bad boyfriend. They might look cute on the outside, but actually they're kind of an alcoholic jerk.
Gosh, we need less of that. Less of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for participating in this speed round. Now, before I let you go, there's one other topic that I would love to talk to you about, and that is the relationship of oxalate to lipedema, which is something I deal with and my clients deal with. There does not seem to be very much research discussing the connection. Is there a connection at all between oxalate overload and lipedema development or symptoms of lipedema?
Probably. And it is a completely unknown connection, completely. This is the greatest example of citizen science. People started coming to me saying their lipedema, Angela Parsons being the first and the real breakthrough person. She deserves a lot of credit for being such an active patient, trying to figure out what the heck. And she attends these conferences that includes the physicians and the surgeons who help these patients. She found my book. She started doing this diet, and her lipedema started going away. And she shared this in a conference, and she found that the world-renowned American surgeon who does liposuction for these women reports grit in these fat samples that come out of their body.
Is that so?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll tell you, I've had so many improvements in switching to, I would say an extremely low oxalate diet, because like I said, I do still include spice. I've never eliminated spices. I do still include cocoa. One of the things that got so much better for me was the pain of my lipedema. And I've got to then now wonder, like, if I'm having these improvements alongside all the other things that carnivore can do for people, if lowering the oxalate is helping with my lipedema, because it has not progressed. What I've seen is that lipedema, this sad tale of it only is progressive, it's going to get worse as you age. And I haven't seen that. I've seen it go sort of back in stage and in, development, and all of my symptoms have been reduced. I mean, that's fantastic. And when people say, oh, you just credit this, you credit carnivore for everything, or you think that oxalate's to blame for everything. But maybe then, yeah, there is a connection there. The grit that he's seeing, are they like the same as kidney stones grit?
A crystalline material. The grit is obviously calcium crystalline material, very likely to be calcium oxalate or another form of calcification that the oxalate will cause in tissues. There's no question that some subtypes of oxalate poisoning, you see this cystic tendency. And so there's lipid crystals can form that aren't even gritty. So I don't think you even have to have grit to have lipid hyperproliferation of lipid materials in the body. And so you've got this hyperproliferation response to the genetic damage and the oxidative stress caused by the oxalates that get stuck in connective tissues. Fat is a major connective tissue and very metabolically active tissue. And some people really do get cysts in response to the crystal formation in tissues. You stop loading up the capillaries full of oxalate and stop delivering oxalate to the tissues, and the tissues seem to be able to calm down and start reversing this process. It's really cool that the body can heal it. Really cool.
That is really, really cool. I mean, I'm so happy to hear you say that there is some basis to the theory that they are connected, because it's just another reason to tell people with lipedema, another thing that we can give them, a tool in their toolbox to say, this could help you. We search for answers all over the internet, and there's just not any discussion of lowering oxalate for helping with lipedema. We always just hear about a surgery is needed, or manual lymphatic drainage is needed, or compression is needed. And sorry, Charlie, you're out of luck. It's going to progress. So
thank Angela for this insight. She's really in my world. She read my book and she came to me and she reported her experience. Her story is on my YouTube channel. I have a series of testimonial stories, and she's shared as well there on my YouTube channel. So you can check out her story there, because she deserves a lot of credit for citizen science, for being involved in her community of her disease type and then reaching out and sharing it. And so the combination of having my book out and having people like Angela in the community is helping us observe phenomenon that is being lost on science. The men with their lipid samples, or the lipid extracted from bodies, put it in a bio waste bag and throw it out, instead of taking it to the lab for examination and make it part of a tissue database where researchers can start studying this tissue and see what's going on in it.
Wow. I mean, that's fascinating. I had no idea. Thank you so much for sharing. And yes, thank you to Angela for helping instigate this. That's fantastic. So, Sally, thank you.
Alerting us to this possibility. And I believe reality. If reality tells us something, I'm going with that.
Right. And we see the improvements. And I'm not the only person who has, gone low oxalate carnivore for me that has seen improvements in their lipedema. I've heard from several women who, like, a carnivore diet is helping them so much in addition to keeping insulin low and keeping inflammation down. It may be that it is a low oxalate diet, and that is also helping their lipedema. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
To think about it too, because lipedema is a fairly modern problem. I don't think there was a big deal of lipedema 100 years ago. And the modern diet is so much higher in oxalate than ever before, so consistent, so year round. We didn't have the same 24-hour a day, 600,000 days a year. I'm like, it's every day now. It used to be that diets were seasonal, and they're not anymore. And that's adding to the potential for this oxalate poisoning. And lipedema is a great example of that, where modern illnesses are connected to modern ways of living.
I'm just blown away. I'm seriously speechless at it. Do you think that it is, in addition to the crystal settling in the fat, do you think that the fact that you've got the proliferation of the lipid crystals, could that be sort of like clogging up the signaling of the fat tissue, which is why it is so hard for women with lipedema to lose weight? What do you think the mechanism is there?
I think there's a lymphatics problem where the lymphatics are no longer able to drain the tissues. And so that adds to this kind of heaviness and the pathology of this tissue is stressed, lots of oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction, and you get this kind of self-perpetuating cycle that the inflammation can get into. And if you don't have effective lymph drainage, it just becomes a mess in there. So you need a certain amount of tissue healing where the capillaries and the lymph tissues start working better again.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. I'm sticking with it. I mean, I love it. And now, Sally, we're going to get to hang out together soon. Next year, May of 2025, we're both headed to Meatstock.
Yeah, that's great. It's a fun time to go to Tennessee and hang out. It's great.
I can't wait to go. I haven't yet gone to that event, but you had been last year.
And the previous time too.
And the previous. It's a beautiful place. I'm looking forward to that. Just to let everybody know, that's May 17th. Say again?
It's really nice to get together. And there just aren't that many on the East Coast. It seems like all the gatherings are in the West. And so I'm just so proud of us to have something going on here in the mid-Atlantic states. It's really fun.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm so looking forward to it. That's great. So now, again, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate you coming on. Can you tell everybody like where they can get your books, find out more about your research, and see all of your things?
Yeah, please come to my website, sallyknorton.com. That's where you're going to find the data book and the cookbook and non-spammy stuff. There's so much fake stuff going now. AI is making it possible to produce all this scammy stuff on Amazon. And so you can't trust what you're finding on Amazon. You can buy toxic superfoods from legitimate booksellers and get the real toxic superfoods, which is out in Spanish, Polish, German, as well as English. But don't buy all that other peripheral stuff and make sure it's actually legitimate. But if you come to my website, you'll get the real deal. It's sallyknorton.com. There's lots of free information there, free downloads. It's the Oxalate Basics will really cover a lot of information for 100% free. You don't even need to buy an $18 book to get a lot of information. So come hang out there, write to me there. If you have a story you want to share, you can do that there. Check out my YouTube channel because that's where you get some inspiring stories, lots of little shorts that very quickly in 1 minute summarize this issue. And so it's an easy way to share the concept with people. And I'm on Instagram too, although lately I've been just distracted and not there as much as I want to be. But there's a lot of information on Instagram about heart attacks and all kinds of pathologies, sciencey stuff, believe it or not, on Instagram, and some workouts and hanging out stuff.
I've seen you working out on Instagram. You are buff.
Sardines and protein keeps your muscles good.
It's awesome. That's great. Your absolute goals. Thank you. And you're so generous with the time and the information that you share. I really do appreciate it, Sally. Thank you so much.
What a delight and privilege to be with you. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
You too.